The alarm screamed through Research Station Themis 9, and Deho dropped his coffee. The hot liquid splashed across his workstation, but he barely noticed. Red lights flashed in the corridor outside his lab. His heart pounded as he grabbed his tablet and rushed toward the command center. Other researchers ran past him, their faces tight with fear. Most of them were not human. The station housed dozens of species, all members of the Concordant Alliance. They were peaceful beings, herbivores and insectoids who had fled their homeworlds long ago to escape the predators that hunted them. Deho was one of only 5 humans on the station. His kind made the others nervous sometimes. Humans were predators too, after all. But they were civilized predators, ones who chose peace over violence. That made all the difference. He burst into the command center and found chaos. Velrin, the station director, stood at the center of the room. The insectoid's many legs clicked nervously against the metal floor. Around him, screens showed a damaged ship floating in the darkness of space. What happened? Deho asked, pushing through the crowd. Kimura, the head of security, turned toward him. The large herbivore's 6 legs trembled slightly. We found a derelict ship. It's old. Very old. What kind of ship? Deho studied the screens more carefully. The vessel looked ancient, its hull scarred and broken. Velrin's compound eyes fixed on him. Vrax. The room went silent. Even Deho felt a chill run down his spine. The Vrax Empire. Every species in the galaxy knew that name. The Vrax had been apex predators, intelligent and ruthless. They had terrorized the galaxy for centuries, destroying entire civilizations. Then, mysteriously, they had vanished. No one knew why or where they went. Are you certain? Deho moved closer to the screens. Yes. Velrin gestured with one long limb. Our scans detected cryogenic pods inside. Most are damaged, but some are still functional. Deho's scientific curiosity battled with common sense. How many pods? 17 intact pods. Kimura's voice shook. We scanned the contents. Most contain adult Vrax specimens, but one pod holds something smaller. A juvenile, Velrin said quietly. A cub. The room erupted in frightened voices. Several researchers backed toward the exits. Deho understood their fear. The Vrax had killed billions. They were monsters from nightmares made real. But they were also a mystery. A species that advanced, that powerful, and then they just disappeared. Something had happened to them. Something important. We should destroy the ship, someone shouted. No. Deho surprised himself with the force of his voice. Everyone turned to look at him. This is a unique opportunity. We could learn so much. Learn what? Kimura demanded. How to die faster when they wake up. They won't wake up unless we revive them, Deho said. The cryogenic systems are failing, but they're still stable. We have time to study this safely. Velrin's antennae twitched. The Council will never approve bringing Vrax specimens aboard this station. Then don't bring them all, Deho argued. Just the cub. It's young, not fully grown. We can keep it contained, study it, understand why the Vrax disappeared. You want to bring a baby predator onto this station? Another researcher, a delicate avian creature, fluttered anxiously. Have you lost your mind? Deho looked around the room. Every face showed fear. He took a breath and spoke carefully. I know you're all scared. I understand why. But think about this. If we can study a Vrax, really understand them, maybe we can make sure nothing like them ever threatens the galaxy again. Knowledge is protection. Velrin was quiet for a long moment. Finally, he spoke. If we do this, you would be responsible. You're the only one here qualified to handle an apex predator. I'll do it, Deho said without hesitation. Are you insane? Hyun's voice came from the doorway. The human engineer pushed into the room, followed by Jiwon, the medical officer. Both looked at Deho like he'd grown a second head. It's a scientific opportunity we can't ignore, Deho insisted. Jiwon crossed her arms. It's a death wish. I'll take precautions. Full containment protocols. Remote monitoring. If anything goes wrong, we can neutralize the specimen immediately. Velrin consulted with other council members in rapid clicks and whistles. Finally, he turned back. The council will vote. If they approve, we'll retrieve the cub's pod. But Deho, if this creature shows any signs of aggression, we will terminate it immediately, and you will stay away from it. Understood, Deho agreed. The vote took 3 hours. Deho spent the time preparing. He reviewed every piece of information about the Vrax in the station's database. There wasn't much. Most records focused on their attacks, their weapons, their ships. Very little existed about their biology or behavior. When the vote came back, it was close. Many council members voted against the proposal. But curiosity and the desire for knowledge won by a narrow margin. They would retrieve the cub. The recovery operation took another 6 hours. The team worked carefully, bringing only the single small pod aboard. They placed it in the station's most secure containment cell, behind multiple layers of reinforced barriers. Daeho stood outside the cell, watching technicians prepare the pod for revival. Hyun worked alongside them, grumbling under his breath about regulations and safety protocols. "You can still back out," Ji-won said quietly. She stood beside Daeho, medical scanner in hand. "No one would blame you." "I need to do this," Daeho replied. "For science." "For science," she echoed, but she didn't sound convinced. The pod opened with a hiss of escaping gas. Frost covered the interior. For several minutes, nothing happened. Then something moved inside. Daeho leaned forward, his breath fogging the observation window. A shape emerged from the white mist. It was small, perhaps the size of a large dog. Scaled skin, reptilian features, 6 eyes that blinked open slowly, long limbs ending in curved claws, a tail that lashed weakly. The cub tumbled out of the pod and collapsed on the containment cell floor. It made a sound, high-pitched and confused. Its 6 eyes opened wider, scanning the strange environment. "Vital signs are stable," Ji-won reported, checking her scanner. "Heart rate elevated." "The creature is disoriented." Daeho watched the cub try to stand. It fell twice before managing to stay on its feet. It looked around, making more sounds. They weren't aggressive sounds. They were frightened sounds. "It's scared," Daeho said. "Good," Kimura muttered from behind them. Fear keeps it cautious, but Daeho didn't think it was good. He thought about waking up alone in a strange place with no pack, no family, nothing familiar. The cub was a predator, yes, but it was also alone and afraid. "I'm going in," Daeho announced. "What?" Multiple voices shouted at once. "You can't." Velrin's antennae stood straight up in alarm. "It's too dangerous." "Look at it," Daeho pointed at the cub. "It's terrified. If I don't establish contact now while it's vulnerable, we may never get another chance." Jan grabbed his arm. "Daeho, that thing could kill you in seconds. Or it could recognize me as another predator and accept me as part of its pack." Daeho gently pulled free. "Predators understand hierarchy and pack structure. I need to show it I'm not a threat." Before anyone could stop him, Daeho moved to the containment cell entrance. He keyed in his access code. The first door opened, then closed behind him. He stood in the airlock, taking deep breaths. "Final warning." Velrin's voice came through the speaker. "Turn back now." Daeho looked at the camera. "Open the inner door." A long pause. Then the inner door slid open. Daeho stepped into the containment cell. The cub's head snapped toward him. All 6 eyes focused on him at once. Its body went rigid. A low sound came from its throat, not quite a growl, but close. Daeho moved slowly, keeping his body relaxed. He didn't look directly at the cub. Direct eye contact could be seen as a challenge. Instead, he angled himself sideways and sat down on the floor. The cub watched him. Its claws flexed against the metal floor. Minutes passed in tense silence. Then the cub took a step forward. Then another. It approached cautiously, its head low. When it got close enough, it stopped and sniffed the air. Daeho stayed perfectly still. The cub moved closer. Its nose, if it could be called that, came within inches of Daeho's face. It inhaled deeply, taking in his scent. Suddenly, the cub's entire body changed. The tension drained away. It made a different sound, almost like a chirp. Then, to everyone's shock, it pressed against Daeho's side and curled up against him. In the observation room, Ji-won gasped. Ion stared in disbelief. Velrin's antennae drooped in confusion. Daeho carefully raised one hand and touched the cub's scaled back. It trembled but didn't pull away. Instead, it pressed closer, making soft sounds. "It thinks I'm Pac," Daeho whispered, knowing the microphones would pick up his voice. "It recognizes me as a predator and wants comfort from another of its kind." The cub had stopped shaking. Its breathing slowed. Within minutes, exhausted from revival and fear, it fell asleep against Daeho's side. Daeho sat there, barely daring to breathe, with an alien apex predator sleeping trustingly against him. Outside the cell, dozens of beings watched in stunned silence, witnessing something impossible. a monster that chose comfort over violence, a predator that sought family instead of prey, and a human who offered both without hesitation. 3 days had passed, and Deho hadn't left the containment cell. He slept on a portable cot that Hyon had brought in. He ate meals delivered through the secure food slot, and he spent every waking hour with the creature he'd named Baram. The name meant wind in Korean, and it fit perfectly. When Baram moved, he was swift and fluid like air itself. The cub had grown more comfortable with Deho, following him everywhere inside the small cell. "You need to come out," Ji-won said through the speaker. She stood in the observation room with her arms crossed. "You haven't had a proper shower in 3 days. "I can't leave," Deho replied, sitting on the floor while Baram curled beside him. "Watch what happens when I move toward the door." Deho stood and walked toward the exit. Immediately, Baram's 6 eyes snapped open. The cub leaped to its feet and rushed after him, making distressed sounds. When Deho stopped, Baram pressed against his legs, trembling. "See? He panics when he thinks I'm leaving." Deho returned to his usual spot and Baram calmed down. Ji-won sighed. "This isn't healthy. For either of you." "I know," Deho admitted. "But I don't know what else to do." Hyon joined Ji-won at the window. The engineer looked tired. "We tried bringing food in without you present. Baram wouldn't touch it. He just sat by the door making those crying sounds until you came back." "He's bonded to you," Ji-won said. "Completely and totally bonded. Is that normal?" Deho asked. "I don't know. There's no data on Vrak's behavioral development." Ji-won checked her tablet. "But I've been researching similar species. Many predators form strong attachments in their early development. If they don't, they can become feral and unstable." Velrin entered the observation room. The station director looked even more stressed than usual. "We have a problem. The council wants to separate you from the specimen." "No," Deho said firmly. "You saw what happens. He needs this bond. They don't care about what the creature needs. They care about what happens to you if you stay in there." Velrin's antennae drooped. "You're wasting away, Deho. You've lost weight. You're not sleeping properly." "I'm fine. You're not fine." Hyon slammed his hand against the window. "You're trapped in there with an alien predator that might decide your food any day now." Baram's head lifted at the loud noise. His scales shifted color, slightly darkening. Deho quickly placed a hand on the cub's back, and the scales returned to their normal shade. "He's not going to hurt me," Deho said quietly. "He thinks I'm family." A new voice joined the conversation. "Then perhaps we should make this arrangement more permanent." Everyone turned to see a woman entering the observation room. She was human, dressed in official Concordat liaison clothing. Her badge identified her as Minseo, a cultural officer. "Who are you?" Velrin asked. "Minseo Park, cultural liaison. I arrived this morning after hearing about your unique situation." She moved to the window and studied Baram with interest. "Fascinating. He's already showing pack behavior." "Pack behavior?" Deho leaned forward. Minseo nodded. "Notice how he positions himself? He's always touching you or staying within arm's reach. When you move, he follows. When you're calm, he's calm. Classic pack bonding." "That's what I thought," Deho said, "but I wasn't sure." "It mirrors what happened on Earth thousands of years ago," Minseo continued. "When humans first domesticated wolves, the wolves that were less afraid of humans that could form bonds with us, those were the ones that survived and thrived." "You think this is domestication?" Ji-won asked skeptically. "I think this is opportunity," Minseo replied. "If a Vrak's cub can bond with a human, it means their species isn't inherently evil. They're capable of forming peaceful relationships." Kimura, who had been listening from the back of the room, stepped forward. "Or it means they're even more dangerous than we thought. They can pretend to be harmless until they're strong enough to kill." "That's not what's happening here," Deho argued. "Baram's responses are genuine. He's not pretending." Minseo pulled out her own tablet. "I've been reviewing historical records of Vrak's attacks. Did you know that in every recorded incident, adult Vraks were always present? There's not a single record of juvenile Vraks participating in raids." "What does that mean?" Velrin asked. "It means the adults kept their young away from violence," Minseo said. "They protected them. That suggests a species capable of care and restraint. Or they were training them for later." Kimura countered. Minseo shook her head. "I don't think so. I think something happened to the Vraks, something that changed them. And maybe studying Baram can help us understand what." Inside the cell, Baram had fallen asleep again. his head resting on Deho's leg. The cub's breathing was slow and steady. Occasionally, his claws would flex in his sleep, and Deho would gently stroke his scaled back until he settled. "You've given him a name," Minseo observed. "Baram. It means wind." "That's significant," Minseo said. "Naming creates relationship. It transforms a specimen into an individual." "He was always an individual," Deho replied. "I just recognized it." Over the next few days, Minseo worked with the council to approve better accommodations. Hyun designed a larger containment area with a separate sleeping space for Deho, a small kitchen, and even a bathroom. It wasn't luxury, but it was livable. Moving Baram to the new space proved challenging. The cub refused to use the transport crate until Deho climbed inside with him. They made the journey together. Baram pressed tightly against Deho's side. The new space helped. Deho could move around more freely. He set up a workspace where he could continue his research. Hyun installed cameras everywhere so the observation team could monitor them constantly. Jiwon visited every day, checking both Deho's and Baram's health through the secure window. She brought meals and fresh clothes. Sometimes she just sat and talked, keeping Deho company. "He's growing fast," she observed one morning. Baram was noticeably larger than when he'd first emerged from the pod. "I know," Deho said. "I'm having to increase his food portions daily." "What does he eat?" "Protein, mostly raw meat. But he also accepts some fruits and vegetables, which surprised me." Deho watched Baram play with a puzzle feeder Hyun had designed. "He's smart too. He figured out that feeder in under an hour." Baram solved the puzzle and looked at Deho, making a pleased chirping sound. Deho smiled and offered praise, which seemed to delight the cub. "You're really becoming his parent," Jiwon said softly. "I guess I am," Deho admitted. "I never thought I'd raise a child. Certainly not an alien predator child." "Are you scared?" "Sometimes," Deho said honestly, "when I think about what he could become. But then I watch him play or see how he trusts me and I think maybe we have a chance to change things." "Change what?" "The cycle, the fear, the violence." Deho gestured to the station beyond their containment. "Everyone out there is terrified of what Baram represents. But what if he could represent something else? What if he could be proof that predators and prey can coexist?" "That's a heavy burden to put on one small creature," Jiwon pointed out. "I know, but someone has to try." Minseo returned a week later with another visitor. Through the observation window, Deho saw an elderly member of the Grelm species. The six-legged herbivore moved slowly, supported by a walking aid. "This is Krithal," Minseo introduced. "He's a historian and a survivor of Rax raids." Krithal stared at Baram with old haunted eyes. The cub noticed the attention and looked back curiously. When Krithal flinched, Baram tilted his head, clearly confused by the fear response. "That's a Vrax," Krithal whispered, "just like the ones that destroyed my home." "He's a juvenile," Minseo said gently. "He's never hurt anyone." "Not yet," Krithal replied. "But he will." "They all do?" Deho wanted to argue, but he understood the old Grelm's pain. How could anyone who'd suffered such trauma believe in redemption? Baram lost interest in the stranger and returned to Deho, bumping his head against Deho's hand in a request for attention. Deho automatically began stroking the cub's scales, and Baram made contented sounds. Krithal watched this interaction in silence. Finally he spoke. "In all my years I never saw a Vrax show gentleness. They were always violent, always aggressive. Maybe they weren't always that way," Minseo suggested. "Maybe something made them that way. What could make an entire species turn evil?" "Desperation," Deho said. "Fear. Pain. We don't know what happened to them. We only know what they became." Krithal was quiet for a long moment. Then he turned and left the observation room without another word. "That could have gone better," Jiwon muttered. "Give him time," Minseo said. Seeing Baram challenged everything he believed about the Vrax, that's not easy to process. That night, Deho lay on his cot while Baram slept nearby. The cub had grown large enough that he no longer fit comfortably on Deho's lap, but he still insisted on sleeping within touching distance. "What are you going to become?" Deho whispered into the darkness. "Will you prove me right? Or will everyone's fears come true?" Baram's tail twitched in his sleep, but he didn't wake. Outside the containment cell, cameras recorded everything. Dozens of researchers studied every movement, every interaction, looking for signs of danger or hope. The whole galaxy seemed to hold its breath, waiting to see what would happen when a predator cub was raised with love instead of violence. Deho closed his eyes and hoped he was doing the right thing. For Barum, for himself, for everyone. 6 months had changed everything. Barum was no longer a small cub. He stood nearly as tall as Deho at the shoulder and weighed easily twice as much. His scales had darkened to a deep blue-green, and his claws were sharp enough to cut through metal if he wanted. But he didn't want to. That was what mattered most. Deho stood in the enlarged containment habitat, watching Barum navigate an obstacle course Hyan had built. The young Vrax leaped from platform to platform with grace and power, his muscles rippling under his scales. When he reached the end, he looked back at Deho for approval. "Good," Deho said, using the hand signal they'd developed together. "Very good." Barum made a pleased rumbling sound and bounded back to Deho's side. Despite his size, he was still gentle. He'd learned to control his strength, to measure his movements around his smaller, more fragile companion. "He's getting massive," Hyun commented through the speaker. The engineer visited daily now, often bringing new enrichment toys or puzzle feeders. "He's still growing," Deho replied. "Jiwon thinks he'll get even bigger." "That's terrifying." "That's nature," Deho corrected. "He needs to be big and strong. That's what his species is meant to be." Jiwon entered the observation room carrying a stack of data pads. "I've been analyzing Barum's development. There's something interesting I want to show you." Deho moved closer to the window. Barum followed, as always. The young Vrax had learned to recognize Deho's friends and no longer showed alarm when they appeared. "What did you find?" Deho asked. "His brain activity is different from what we expected," Jiwon explained. "We compared it to the scans we took of the adult Vrax still in cryosleep. Their neural patterns show signs of damage or degradation, but Barum's brain is healthy and developing normally." "What does that mean?" "I think the adult Vrax were sick," Jiwon said. "Something affected their brains, changed how they thought and behaved." Minseo arrived just in time to hear this. "I've been researching the same thing. Look at this." She displayed information on the window screen. Historical records show that Vrax behavior changed dramatically about 200 years before they disappeared. Before that, they were aggressive but not genocidal. Something happened to make them worse. "A disease?" Deho asked. "Possibly. Or environmental factors. Or genetic damage." Minseo pulled up more data. "Whatever it was, it seems to have affected their ability to form normal social bonds." Inside the habitat, Barum had found one of his favorite toys, a large ball filled with treats. He batted it around with his front claws, occasionally glancing at Deho to make sure his human was still watching. "Barum doesn't have those problems," Deho observed. "He bonds easily. He understands social cues. He even shows empathy." It was true. Just yesterday, Deho had accidentally cut his hand on a sharp edge. Barum had immediately noticed his distress. The young Vrax had gently nuzzled Deho's injured hand, making soft, concerned sounds until Jiwon arrived to treat the wound. "Because you raised him properly," Minseo said. "You gave him what the other Vrax lost: structure, affection, stability." "We need to present this to the council," Jiwon said. "If the Vrax were suffering from a medical condition, it changes everything." "They won't care," a new voice said. Taemin, a human psychologist, had joined the group. He'd arrived on the station a month ago to study Barum's psychological development. "The council members who survived Vrax attacks won't care about excuses." "They're not excuses," Minseo argued. "They're explanations. Try telling that to someone who lost their family," Taemin replied. "Trauma doesn't care about logic." Deho understood what Taemin meant. Krithal still came to the observation room sometimes, watching Barum with conflicted eyes. The old Grell never spoke, but his presence said enough. He wanted to hate Barum but found it difficult when the young Vrax acted nothing like the monsters from his memories. Training continued. Deho had established clear routines and boundaries. Barum learned commands in both Korean and the Vrax language that Deho had painstakingly studied from old recordings. The young Vrax responded to verbal cues, hand signals, and even subtle body language. "Show me gentle," Deho instructed. Barum approached and carefully placed one massive paw on Deho's outstretched hand. Despite weighing hundreds of pounds, he applied almost no pressure. He could have crushed every bone in Deho's hand, but chose not to. "Perfect," Deho praised, offering Barum a treat. "Remarkable," Taemin murmured from the observation room. "He has complete control over his strength." "Because Deho taught him control," Minseo said. "This is what proper socialization does." But not everyone was impressed. Kimura watched the training sessions with suspicion. The security chief had never trusted Bahram, and made no secret of it. "It's an act," Kimura insisted during a council meeting that Daiho could hear through the speakers. "The creature is intelligent. It's pretending to be tame until it's strong enough to break free." "Bahram isn't pretending," Velrin replied. The station director had become one of Bahram's cautious supporters. "The behavioral data is clear. His responses are genuine." "Today they are," Kimura said. "What about tomorrow? What about when he's fully grown?" It was a fair question, and Daiho didn't have a perfect answer. He could only trust what he'd observed. Bahram had never shown aggression toward him or anyone else. Even when startled or frightened, the young Vrax's first instinct was to retreat to Daiho, not to attack. One afternoon, something happened that tested everyone's faith. The station's environmental systems malfunctioned. Alarms blared without warning. Lights flashed. The sudden noise and chaos sent most residents into a panic. Daiho covered his ears, wincing at the painful sound. Beside him, Bahram went rigid. The young Vrax's scales darkened to near black, a stress response they'd documented. His lips pulled back, revealing rows of sharp teeth. For the first time since his revival, Bahram looked dangerous. Through the observation window, Daiho could see people scrambling to escape. Some ran for the exits, others froze in fear. Kimura reached for the emergency containment override, ready to flood the habitat with sedative gas. But Daiho didn't run. He didn't panic. He stood his ground and used the calming signal he'd taught Bahram, a specific gesture combined with a low, steady tone. "Bahram," he said clearly. "Look at me, focus." Bahram's 6 eyes fixed on Daiho. His massive body trembled with fight-or-flight instinct. Every muscle was tensed, ready to spring into action. "You're safe," Daiho continued, keeping his voice calm despite his racing heart. "I'm here. Nothing's wrong. Listen to my voice." Slowly, incredibly slowly, Bahram's scales began to lighten. His teeth disappeared behind closed jaws. The tension in his body eased. He took a step toward Daiho, then another, until he pressed against his human side. Daiho wrapped his arms around Bahram's neck, feeling the powerful muscles relax under his touch. "Good boy," he whispered. "Such a good boy. You controlled it. I'm so proud." By the time Hyan fixed the malfunction and the alarm stopped, Bahram was completely calm. He stayed close to Daiho but showed no signs of aggression or panic. In the observation room, silence reigned. Even Kimura looked stunned. "That was your moment," Minseo said quietly to the security chief. If Bahram was going to attack, that was when. He was startled, frightened, in full stress response. But he didn't lash out. He looked to Daiho for guidance. Krathal had witnessed the incident too. The old Greln stood at the window, staring at Bahram with wide eyes. "The Vrax I knew would have killed everyone in this room," he said softly. "They wouldn't have hesitated. They wouldn't have stopped to think." "Bahram isn't those Vrax," Daiho said. "He's different because he was raised differently. Or because he's still young," Kimura countered. But there was less conviction in the security chief's voice. Later that evening, Daiho sat with Bahram in their shared space. The young Vrax had finally settled down, though he remained closer than usual, clearly still unsettled by the earlier chaos. "You did so well today," Daiho told him, stroking the ridge between his eyes. "Bahram loved that particular spot. I know it was scary, but you trusted me. That's everything." Bahram made a soft chirping sound and rested his head on Daiho's lap. Despite his size, he still sought comfort the same way he had as a small cub. Taman visited later with his assessment. That incident was a crucial test. Bahram demonstrated impulse control in a high-stress situation. That's advanced cognitive function. "So you believe he's not dangerous?" Daiho asked hopefully. "I believe he's as dangerous as any apex predator," Taman replied honestly, "but I also believe he chooses not to be. That choice is what matters. That's what makes him different." Sunwoo, a human data analyst, joined the research team soon after. She spent weeks diving deep into recovered Vrax records, piecing together their history. "I found something," she announced during a presentation to the council. The Vrax had a complex society before they became raiders. They had art, culture, family structures. Then something changed. She displayed images on the screens. Ancient Vrax artifacts showing family groups, adults caring for young. It looked nothing like the monsters everyone remembered. "What happened to them?" Velrin asked. "I think they lost the ability to bond," Sunwoo explained. Something, probably a disease or genetic mutation, damaged the part of their brain that allowed them to form attachments. Without that ability, they became isolated, aggressive, unstable. The alert came in the middle of the night cycle. Daeho woke to the sound of urgent voices through the speaker system. Beside him, Baram lifted his head, instantly alert to Daeho's tension. "What's happening?" Daeho called out, moving to the observation window. Velrin appeared, his compound eyes reflecting stress. Long-range scanners picked up a ship. "It's Vrax design, and it's active." Daeho's heart stopped. "Active? You mean there are living Vrax on it?" "Yes, the ship is heading toward Concordat space. It will reach us in approximately 3 days." The station erupted into chaos. Emergency council meetings were called. Ships prepared for possible evacuation. Fear spread like wildfire through the corridors. Baram sensed something was wrong. He pressed close to Daeho, making worried sounds. Daeho tried to comfort him, but his own anxiety made it difficult. "What does this mean for us?" Daeho asked. "The council is divided," Velrin admitted. "Some want to destroy Baram before the other Vrax arrive. Others want to use him as a bargaining tool." "He's not a tool," Daeho said sharply. "He's a living being. I know that. But not everyone sees it that way." By morning, new ships had arrived. Human military vessels sent by Earth's government. Daeho watched them dock with growing dread. When the commander came aboard, his worst fears were confirmed. Yoonji was her name, a stern-faced military liaison. She entered the observation room with armed guards and authority in her eyes. "I'm here to take custody of the Vrax specimen," she announced. "No," Daeho said immediately. "Baram stays with me." "That's not your decision," Yoonji replied. "Earth's government has jurisdiction over all human-managed specimens. We're transferring it to a secure facility." "You can't do that," Hyun protested, standing beside Daeho. "He's bonded. Separation could kill him. Or it could remind him what he really is," Yoonji countered. "A predator. A weapon." "He's not a weapon," Jiwon added, joining the argument. "He's a child. Daeho's child." Yoonji's expression didn't soften. "Sentiment won't protect us when a Vrax warship arrives. We need leverage. We need to show them we have one of their own." "You want to use Baram as a hostage," Minseo said, appearing in the doorway. "That's barbaric. That's survival," Yoonji shot back. "The Vrax killed billions. If having one of their cubs gives us an advantage, we'll use it." Inside the habitat, Baram paced nervously. He could feel the tension even through the reinforced walls. His scales shifted through colors, showing his distress. "You're scaring him," Daeho said. "Look what you're doing to him." "I don't care about its feelings," Yoonji replied coldly. "Then you should," Taemin interjected. He'd been listening quietly, but now stepped forward. "Because that creature has shown more humanity than you're showing right now." The argument continued for hours. June, a human security specialist Yoonji had brought with her, began setting up new containment protocols. Heavy weapons, stronger barriers, everything designed to control rather than nurture. Admiral Yindar arrived next, representing the Concordat military. The Grellan admiral was even more hardline than Yoonji. "The Vrax are coming," Admiral Yindar stated flatly. "We should destroy the specimen now before they arrive. Show them we won't be intimidated." "That would be murder," Daeho argued. "That would be justice," the admiral replied, "for all the billions they killed." Krithal entered the room quietly. The old historian looked tired but determined. "You're wrong," he said to the admiral. Everyone turned to look at him in surprise. "I lost everything to the Vrax," Krithal continued. "My family, my home, my entire world. I have more reason than anyone to hate them. But that young Vrax in there," he pointed at Baram. "He's not responsible for what his ancestors did. He never hurt anyone." "He hasn't hurt anyone yet," Admiral Yindar corrected. "Give him time." "I've had months to watch him," Krithal said. "He's had opportunities. During the alarm incident, he could have killed dozens of us. He was frightened, stressed, in full defensive mode. But he didn't attack. He looked to Daeho for guidance instead. One incident doesn't prove anything," the admiral argued. "It proves everything," Krithal countered. "It proves he can choose. And he chooses peace. Every single day he chooses peace." The debate raged on. Daeho felt helpless, watching people argue over Baram's fate like he was property instead of a person. Baram himself had given up pacing and lay near the window, his 6 eyes fixed sadly on Daeho. Sunwoo burst into the room with new information. "I decrypted more files from the derelict ship. There's a message. The Vraks left it deliberately for anyone who found their cryogenic vessels. What does it say? Velrin asked. Sunwoo played the recording. A Vrak's voice spoke in their ancient language, and the computer translated, "We are the last. The sickness has taken everything from us. Our bonds are broken. Our children are lost. We can no longer feel connection, only rage. We have become monsters. We do not deserve to live. But our young, stored in sleep, they are innocent. They carry no sickness. If you find them, please show them mercy. Teach them to be better than we became. This is our final request, our final hope." Silence filled the observation room. Even Admiral Indar looked shaken. "They knew they were sick," Minso whispered. "They knew what they'd become." "They were asking for help," Jiwon added. "For their children." Yoonji's jaw tightened. "It doesn't change anything. We still have a Vrax warship approaching." "Maybe they're coming for the same reason we found that message," Yeon suggested. "Maybe they're looking for their cubs. Or maybe they're coming to finish what they started," the Admiral said. Daeho couldn't take it anymore. He'd been listening to people decide Baram's fate without including him. He walked to the habitat entrance and keyed in his code. "What are you doing?" Hyunji demanded. "I'm staying with Baram," Daeho replied. "Whatever happens, I'm not leaving him. You can't go in there. It's not secure, it's secure enough. It's been secure for 6 months." Daeho stepped into the airlock. "Baram is my responsibility. If you want to take him, you'll have to go through me." Yeon immediately joined him. "He's right. We're not letting you take Baram." "Me neither," Jiwon said, moving toward the airlock. "This is mutiny," Yoonji warned. "This is family," Yeon corrected. "You wouldn't understand." One by one, the human team members chose their side. They stood together, protecting Baram from those who would use or harm him. Minseo turned to the council members. "You have a choice to make. You can respond to the approaching Vraks with violence and fear, or you can try something different, something unprecedented." "What are you suggesting?" Velrin asked. "Let Baram be our ambassador," Minseo said. "Let them see what their cub has become. A healthy, bonded, peaceful individual. Show them that healing is possible." "That's insane," Admiral Yundar said, "is it?" Minseo challenged. "The Vraks left those cubs in cryosleep hoping someone would care for them. We did, Daeho did. Now their people are coming. Maybe they're coming to see if any of their children survived. And if they attack?" the Admiral demanded. "Then we defend ourselves," Minseo replied, "but at least we tried peace first." The debate continued late into the night. Daeho sat with Baram in the habitat, holding his massive scaled head in his lap. The young Vrax was upset, confused by all the tension and anger. "I won't let them take you," Daeho promised. "I won't let them hurt you." Baram made a soft sound, trusting completely in his human's words even if he couldn't understand them all. Outside, Taemin worked with Minseo to convince the council. They presented behavioral data, psychological assessments, everything they'd learned about Baram's development. "The Vraks who are coming aren't the same ones who attacked you," Taemin argued. "That message said they were the last. These might be survivors who managed to preserve their sanity. Or they might be the worst of them," Kimura countered, though even the security chief sounded less certain than before. Krithal spoke again. "I spent my whole life hating the Vraks. I still have nightmares about what they did. But when I look at that young one in there, I don't see a monster. I see what they might have been before the sickness took them. I see what they could be again." The old Grelm's words carried weight. He had suffered more than most. If he could advocate for mercy, who could argue? Finally, after hours of debate, Velrin made a decision. "We will not destroy the young Vraks. We will not hand him over to be used as a weapon. When the Vrak ship arrives, we will attempt peaceful contact. Daeho and Baram will be part of that contact if Daeho agrees." "I agree," Daeho said immediately through the speaker. "Baram and I will face them together." "You're risking all our lives," Admiral Indar warned. "I'm risking my life," Daeho corrected. "The rest of you can evacuate if you want, but I believe the Vraks deserve a chance, just like Baram deserved a chance." Yoonji shook her head but didn't argue further. "Earth's government won't be happy about this." "Earth's government doesn't have to live with the consequences," Yeon said. "We do. The Vrak ship would arrive in 2 days. 2 days to prepare, 2 days to hope they were making the right choice." Daeho spent those days with Baram, strengthening their bond, practicing their signals and commands. If they were going to face Baram's people together, they needed to be perfectly in sync. On the final night before the Vrak's arrival, Deho couldn't sleep. He lay awake watching Baram breathe in the darkness. The young Vrax had grown so much. He was powerful and dangerous, capable of terrible violence. The Vrax ship hung in space like a dark promise. It was massive, dwarfing the research station. Weapon systems were visible across its hull, dormant but present. Everyone on Themis 9 held their breath. Deho stood in the main docking bay with Baram at his side. The young Vrax was nervous, his scales shifting through colors. He could sense something important was happening. Deho kept one hand on Baram's back, offering comfort through touch. Around them, security forces maintained a careful distance. Weapons were ready but not aimed. Velrin had insisted on the compromise. They would show peaceful intent but remain prepared for violence. He unchecked his equipment one final time. He'd rigged up translation devices and recording systems. Jiwan stood nearby with medical supplies. Minseo waited with diplomatic credentials. The entire human team had refused to leave Deho alone. "They're hailing us," a communications officer announced. Velrin's voice came through the speakers. "Open a channel." The view screen activated. A Vrax face appeared and everyone tensed. But this Vrax looked different from the monsters in historical records. Its eyes were clear, not wild. Its movements were controlled, not frantic. "I am Krelnak, captain of the last Vrax vessel," the alien said. The translation came through perfectly. "We detected the beacon from our cryogenic ship. We have come for our young." Deho stepped forward before anyone could stop him. "I am Deho. I've been caring for one of your cubs. His name is Baram." Krelnak's 6 eyes widened, all of them fixed on the screen, and Deho realized the Vrax could see Baram standing beside him. "Alive," Krelnak whispered. "One of our children is alive, and healthy. There are others," Velrin added carefully, "still in cryosleep. But we only revived one. We weren't sure what to do." "You cared for him," Krelnak said, and there was emotion in the alien's voice. "A prey species cared for a Vrax cub." "I'm not prey," Deho replied. "And Baram isn't a monster. He's just a child who needed someone." Krelnak was silent for a long moment. Then the Vrax spoke again. "May I come aboard? I wish to see this miracle with my own eyes." Admiral Yendar immediately protested. "Absolutely not. We will not allow armed Vrax onto this station." "Then I will come unarmed," Krelnak replied. "Alone. I only wish to see our young one." The council debated quickly. Finally, Velrin made the decision. "You may board, but you will be escorted at all times." Agreed. The Vrax shuttle was small, carrying only Krelnak as promised. When it docked, security teams surrounded it. "Weapons ready." Hearts pounding. The airlock opened. Krelnak stepped through. The Vrax was enormous, even larger than Baram. Scales of deep purple covered its body. Multiple eyes scanned the bay, taking in everything. When those eyes found Baram, they stopped. Baram went rigid. He'd never seen another of his kind. The young Vrax stared at Krelnak with confusion and recognition mixed together. Instinct told him this was family. Experience told him this was a stranger. Krelnak took a step forward. Every weapon in the bay tracked the movement. But the Vrax captain moved slowly, carefully. "Non-threatening." "Young one," Krelnak said in the Vrax language. "Do you know what you are?" Baram tilted his head. He understood some words. Deho had taught him, but hearing them from another Vrax was different. Krelnak tried again, this time using body language. Specific movements, tail positions, scale color changes. It was like watching a complex dance. Baram responded hesitantly. His body moved through similar patterns. Clumsy, uncertain, but recognizable. He was speaking his native language for the first time. "He remembers," Krelnak said with wonder. "Somewhere deep inside he remembers what he is. He knows what he is," Deho corrected.
"He's Baram. He's my family." Krelnak's eyes turned to Deho. "You raised him?"
"Yes." "Taught him?" "Yes." "Loved him?" "Yes," Deho said firmly. "I love him." Krelnak made a sound, something between a laugh and a sob. "We hoped. When we placed our young in cryosleep, we hoped someone would find them. Someone kind. We never dared imagine someone would love them." "Tell us what happened to your people," Minseo requested gently. "Help us understand." Krelnak settled onto the floor, making the aliens around them less nervous by becoming smaller. Baram watched, then mimicked the position, learning from his elder. "The sickness came slowly," Krelnak began. "At first we thought it was stress. War fatigue. We had been fighting for territory for so long. But then we realized we couldn't feel bonds anymore. Parents looked at their children and felt nothing. Mates became strangers. Pack bonds dissolved. Without those bonds, we went mad, the Vrax captain continued. We became the monsters you remember. We killed not because we were evil, but because we were broken, lost, alone in our own minds. Jiwan leaned forward. But you're not broken now. No, Krelnak agreed. We few who remain, we survived by artificial means. Technology that mimics pack bonds. It's not the same as real connection, but it keeps us sane. Keeps us aware of what we became and the shame we must carry. We found your message, Sunwoo said. In the derelict ship. You asked for mercy for your young. And you gave it, Krelnak looked at Barum again. He's healthy, stable, bonded, everything we hoped for. He's bonded to me, Deho clarified. Not to another Vrax. I see that. Krelnak's scales shifted to a lighter color. It's better than we imagined. If our young can bond with other species, they can live anywhere. Be part of any community. They won't need us. Something in the Vrax's voice sounded sad. Deho understood. Krelnak was looking at a future where Vrax children didn't need Vrax adults, where their species might survive only by being adopted by others. What about the adults? Admiral Indar asked. The ones still in cryosleep. They're too damaged, Krelnak replied. The sickness has progressed too far. Even if we woke them, they would be dangerous, unstable. It's why we only preserve the very young. Only they had a chance, Yunji spoke up. Earth scientists might be able to help. If this is a medical condition, there could be treatments. We've tried everything, Krelnak said. For generations, we searched for a cure. We found nothing. You didn't have Barum, Jiwan interjected. His brain chemistry is different, healthy. We've been studying how he formed bonds. It might be possible to replicate that process. For the first time, hope appeared in Krelnak's eyes. Truly? No promises, Jiwan cautioned. But we have data, samples. If we work together, maybe we can find answers. Barum, who had been quietly watching the adults talk, suddenly moved. He approached Krelnak slowly. The young Vrax sniffed the air around the captain, taking in the scent of his own species. Krelnak remained perfectly still. Hello, young one, Barum chirped softly. Then he did something unexpected. He touched his nose to Krelnak's, the same greeting he gave Deho every morning. Krelnak's entire body shuddered. He's greeting me. As Pack. You're his species, Deho said. Some part of him recognizes that. But Barum wasn't finished. After greeting Krelnak, he returned to Deho's side and pressed against his human's legs, making his choice clear, respecting his elder but staying with his chosen family. He's yours, Krelnak acknowledged. Truly yours. And you've made him better than we ever were. Over the next few days, something remarkable happened. Krelnak's ship didn't attack. Instead, they negotiated. The Vrax asked permission to retrieve the remaining cryogenic pods. They wanted to save their children. The council debated, but Krithal spoke in their favor. They came in peace. They could have attacked, but they didn't. They deserve a chance to save their young, just as we gave one young Vrax a chance. An agreement was reached. The Vrax could have their cubs, but only if they were raised with oversight. Multi-species teams would care for them, ensuring they developed healthy bonds like Barum had. We accept, Krelnak said. We want our children to be better than we were. If that means sharing them with the galaxy, so be it. A new facility was established, not a research station but a sanctuary. Young Vrax would be raised there alongside caregivers from multiple species, learning coexistence from birth. Taman arrived in person to oversee the psychological development programs. Irix, a young Ithrix scientist inspired by Barum's story, volunteered to be one of the first non-human caregivers. Even some brave Greln came forward, wanting to prove that prey and predator could build a better future together. Barum became an ambassador of sorts, the first successfully raised Vrax cub. Other young Vrax, newly awakened, watched him interact with different species. They learned from his example that claws could be gentle, that strength could be controlled, that bonds could form across impossible divides. 6 months after the Vrax ship's arrival, Deho stood in the sanctuary's central garden. Barum was now fully grown, massive and powerful, but he still followed Deho everywhere, still sought his approval, still pressed his head into Deho's hands for scratches behind his eye ridges. Other cubs played nearby. A small Vrax chased a ball while a grown caregiver watched nervously but with growing confidence. Another cub worked on a puzzle with Irix, the two of them communicating through patience and understanding. Krelnak approached Deho slowly. The Vrax captain had been coming to the sanctuary often, watching the children with proud sadness. "You've given us a gift," Krelnak said, "a future we didn't think we deserved." "Everyone deserves a chance to heal," Deho replied. "You were sick. That wasn't your fault.